I am your friendly neighborhood J-Man. This is the almost internet famous internet show, and today is the first of my two-part interview with Sideshow Collectibles sculptor Steve Schu Schumacher.
And now, the aggregator of awesome, the curator of cool, my dad, your friendly neighborhood Jaman.
Man, do I have a treat for you guys today. We're heading in a bit of a departure for this week's show. Instead of the usual comic book nonsense, we're going to be talking to the man behind some of Sideshow Collectibles' most popular statues. I'm talking the premium format figures. I'm talking about Wonder Woman. Yes, that Wonder Woman. Harley Quinn and Sinestro too. I'm talking about the guy behind J. Scott Campbell's line. You know, MJ, Spidey, and my personal favorite, Gwen Stacy. With a round of applause, please help me welcome to the show, Steve Schu Schumacher. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great, man. Having a good day.
I'd like to start off things by asking you about your site. It's Saturday Morning. Where does that come from?
For me, it's actually deeply personal. I think like a lot of kids, when I was little, Saturday morning was like that one day of the week where you could just like get away from everything. I had a really hard time in school when I was a little kid, and Saturday morning was like solace. It was like literally an escape, and that's where I got so interested in animation. And I still get up on Saturday mornings and watch cartoons. They're all on DVD now, but
yeah, it's not the same anymore. Are you a kid of the 70s or an 80s kid?
80s, 70s, yeah.
I remember getting up Saturday mornings, being glued to the TV till my mother would come down and just scream me stupid.
Yeah, I would be up from like 6:30 until noon and watching cartoons. So
Cartoon Network kind of ruins that whole vibe.
Yeah, when it's readily available every day of the week, there's nothing to look forward to. And
yeah, it's not special anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what that was like all about to me. That was like something that was really important to me, meant a lot to me. It was really good for the soul, and that's what it still is now.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Now, is that just the name of your site, or do you have a production company too?
It's the name of my site, but it was kind of like a I guess creating a brand for anything that I do.
Yeah.
So it goes across the board for whatever I might be working on. Hey, there you go.
So you're into animation too?
Yeah, actually, I went to school for animation. I went to Cal Arts.
That's cool.
And got out of school, started working for DreamWorks feature animation.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was all traditional animation when I was doing it. And I worked on I think 5 productions and started sculpting maquettes, got into like maquette sculpting.
Yeah.
And through that, I was given a chance to sculpt some neutral poses of characters that were going to be digitized for their first all DreamWorks digital CGI production of Shark Slayer.
Okay.
So that's when everything went digital. So
the hand-drawn stuff, can you talk about what you've worked on?
I worked on Prince of Egypt.
Great movie.
Thank you. Well, thank you like I did it.
I did most of the work.
Road to El Dorado.
Okay. That's
Spirit.
good one.
What else was in there? And then I did my first maquette on Sinbad, and then did maquettes on Shark Slayer.
Well, you know, those first two are really like the golden age of DreamWorks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 4 kids. They grew up in the late 90s into the 2000s, and we watched Prince of Egypt all the time. Yeah, same with El Dorado.
Yeah, El Dorado is my favorite, I think, just because it's more colorful, it's more fun, and more broadly animated. Prince of Egypt was a huge production, and it was so much work, and that was my first job, and it was like right into the fire, unlimited overtime. So it was seriously, it was kind of like burnout. My first.
Were you just doing in-betweens, or were you doing everything?
Oh, I started out as an in-betweener, and then ended up doing breakdowns, which is like between the main keyframe poses, and then that gets handed off to an in-betweener.
Do you still do it, Are you still involved in animation at all?
I still love animation, but I haven't worked in animation since DreamWorks. Yeah. And once I started sculpting, that's where my mind was.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like I moved on from it.
Yeah.
You know, I really enjoy the physical nature of sculpting.
How did you make the transition? Was it something you were doing in your free time?
Yeah. When I was working on El Dorado, I think I started sculpting at home just on the weekends. You know, I'd throw in like I'd have a whole stack of movies lined up, and then I was sculpting. I think my first one was Simon Bisley's Batman. It was just his head to start out, and it kind of grew into like the neck, the shoulders, and the chest, and then this kind of like misproportioned bust. But anyway, that was my first sculpting experience. And then after that, I sort of like gave myself assignments like, let's do a full figure male, let's do a full figure female, let's do a creature, and yeah, I was just like sculpting on my own time.
So DreamWorks was the first maquette you did?
That was going to be for the production of Sinbad, and I was working on Spirit with an English lady named Jenny Langley and a French animator Bruce Ferris. And Jenny saw my sculpting, and I had talked about wanting to do maquette sculpting, and she literally she took me by the arm and dragged me into Bruce's office because I was too hesitant. You know, I was embarrassed, and surprisingly, Bruce was just like, "Yeah, sure, okay." And so we had downtime in between each production. So now I was coming back to the studio as a guest. Bruce would have me in as a guest, and he would be doing animation tests, working out the character design of Kale, who is like Sinbad's first mate, like big muscly guy. And I started sculpting the maquette, and Bruce would be working out designs, and sometimes he would look at what I was doing, it would give him an idea, he would adjust the character, he would give me a sketch, I would adjust the maquette, and so I literally was like sculpting it right next to him while he was drawing the character.
So do both sides affect one another? Because you're involved with both sides of the process. When you see a maquette, I guess it really does affect what you're drawing.
It does. Right, well that's initially, that's what maquettes were really for. So in traditional animation, you would have a physical model of the character, and that would help you to turn it. You could look at it from an up angle, and that would help you to draw the head from that odd perspective and so forth. So it was literally a physical reference for the artists, and then they became collectible.
So what was the first sculpture you did for commission or for
like professional work?
Yeah, thank you.
I did some stylized like animation maquettes for a small company that was like around town, like in Burbank, and those were being molded and cast at Gentle Giant. And because of that, like my work became familiar with people at Gentle Giant, and because of that, I was able to apply and eventually get a job there.
That's cool.
And so that's how I got into, like, I guess, you know, like doing stuff professional. But I did do freelance. When I was doing those first ones, they were freelance for like nearly 3 years.
So do you work exclusively for Sideshow?
I'm exclusively with Sideshow, but they're pretty open to freelance work, you know, as long as it's not like with a direct competitor. Like we have lots of guys that they come from the toy and the effects industry, so sometimes they get offered work. You know, sometimes a friend will call up another guy saying, I'm working on a film project, we need a prosthetic, can you help us out? And they kind of really need to do it. So, you know, Sideshow's just like, yeah, sure, you know, whatever, as long as it's not like direct competitor.
So how does the process work for like the J. Scott Campbell statues?
I think that well, first of all, the head of design, the art director of our design department, David Igo, he's already the type of guy who's like he's really, like all of us, he's like a fan of all this stuff that we work on. So he'll know the artist most likely. He's all over DeviantArt and everything like that. And So he actually already had the idea of doing something with J. Scott Campbell.
Okay.
And I think that they wrapped it all together saying, well, if we wanted to do something with him, we could do some Marvel stuff, some Marvel women, or we could do the Marvel women of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And that's how it came about.
Okay.
And with J. Scott Campbell, you give him that idea, and all of a sudden you get tons of artwork.
Okay.
And, you know, he starts drawing it, like doing turnarounds and all these different angles, and that is like magic. Because a lot of the time, at least the way that I started out working, it would be from one illustration.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't get a side view, a rear view, you know, all kinds of angles of it.
How does that work for you? When you get a side view or a one pose, do you go out and look for more references, or do you just know in your head and in your hands?
It's a little bit of both. But what I usually do, and like I said, this is how I started out, like with that Bisley Batman, since I didn't have an actual turnaround of the character,
Yeah.
I went through the whole comic book and I compiled a turnaround. You know, photocopied it, sized them all so that they were all similar,
Yeah.
and then I had a front view, a side view, a three-quarter, a rear view, and started working on the sculpt from that. So with all this stuff, you kind of have to put together all that stuff from what you've got. If J. Scott Campbell does a drawing and I don't have those other views, I can look at other work that he's done
Okay.
and put together something and kind of extrapolate from the way that he would draw other characters from those different angles and work on it from there.
With these particular statues, who ends up picking the pose?
I think that usually it comes from design.
Okay.
And I think that's worked out with J. Scott Campbell. Like for those ones in particular, I think he had some ideas, you know, just off the top of his head, like, I think this would be great. What do you think of this?
Yeah.
And they just started bouncing back and forth, and they worked something out eventually and kind of worked out like a theme for like the poses. Like if one of the characters is standing up, you know, another character might be in more of a sitting position and, you know, whatever, so that there was this sort of like natural skyline to the whole group of sculptures as a whole.
Out of the three, the one I like the most is the Gwen Stacy statue. There's something kinetic about it. I guess it's the rain, because of the raindrops like pinging off the base. And she's got a good look about her. It's a really good statue. How long does the process take?
Thanks. That was the raindrops, like, you know, the way that he drew it is you kind of saw the rain, you know, hitting the top of the umbrella and hitting the ground and all that.
Yeah. And
And I really wanted to stay true to the illustration, and I just was trying to push it, like, how can you bring that into reality and, you know, sort of illustrate in clay, like the rain. So I tried it, and it was just one of those things where, okay, we'll show it to him and see what he thinks. If he doesn't like it, we'll get rid of it.
Okay.
And he liked it. He actually really liked it.
Yeah.
And so that's how that ended up. And it was, I think it was like an absolute nightmare for production, because all those little rain hits had to be separate.
Yeah.
You know, but it's something different.
How long does the process take from, say, you getting the design of the sculpture to it being approved?
It all depends. You know, it could take a month. It could take 2 months. It depends on the complexity of the sculpt. But usually, I'll start working on it, and I'll get like when it was traditional. I'm working mainly digital right now, but when it was traditional, I would work out of clay until it got to a point where it was recognizable. It was all sort of fleshed out, the pose and all that. Maybe there were no facial details, but the whole body was there and it was in pose. And usually that would be a photo turnaround would be sent. J. Scott Campbell would see it, and a lot of the time it was just like, okay, fine, you know, keep going.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like check-ins like that.
Okay.
And then it would get to a point where detail was pretty much, it was there. It was still rough in clay, but then we were going to take it to molding and casting and get a wax pour of that. So then we would probably get like a sign-off, like, okay, we're ready to go to the next step. What do you think? And you know, bang out any changes or whatever at that point and take it into wax and keep going with it.
So you'll start the process in clay and then go to wax.
Yeah. For me, that's the way I always like to work.
Okay.
I have friends who will start something completely in wax and take it to finish.
Okay.
I always liked working in clay with an armature because I constantly tweak the pose, and wax isn't pliable like that.
I've heard wax is difficult to work in.
It's awesome for detailing, but it's very crisp. It's got it'll snap like cleanly across.
Yeah.
And so if you want to subtly move something, you can't really do that unless you soften it with hot water. You let the heat permeate all the way through a piece, and then you can slowly bend it a little bit. But that takes too long, and like posing something in wax, like I said, you've got to break it, weld it together, break it, weld it together. With clay, with an armature in it, you can literally just grip it, move it, and just bend it and do whatever you want, and then refill with clay to fix stuff up. So I will work it all out in clay, and then get a wax casting of that.
But you said you do digital now. Is that by choice, or is that just where the industry is going?
It's both. Initially, it was because of how the industry was going. I really, really, really love it now, though.
Do you?
And it's been a struggle.
I'm not trying to minimize or anything, but do you still feel it's sculpting?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And strangely enough, everyone I work with feels like it's sculpting. It's just another tool.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just like first of all, we still in the sculpt room, all of us are traditional sculptors first.
Okay.
And we will still have to do some traditional sculpting. Sometimes you have problems with the digital output, and you actually have to re-sculpt something.
Okay.
So you have to be able to do that. Other things might be too big and too expensive to print, so it would be easier to just sculpt them out of clay and mold it, or make it out of found objects or something like that. But as far as the sculpting goes, if you start from a ball of clay and you turn it into something, it's a sculpture.
Yeah.
If you start from a digital ball of clay and you make it into something, it's a sculpture. You print it out, it's there. It's only there.
Is that really how it works? Is it really just like a digital ball of clay?
Yeah.
Is that really how it is?
Well, it depends. Nowadays, a lot of people will do things like downloading pre-made models. Like if you can start with a female figure, you can download that. I prefer to do all that stuff myself. So I'm slowly building up a library of parts from previous sculpts. Like I'll have a female figure, a male figure, heads, hands, feet, and all that stuff. So if I need to start something quickly, I can use my own generic female body to get started on a sculpt. And all that stuff was started from like just a sphere, a digital sphere. And if you spend as much time doing a digital sculpt as it takes because of all the detailing that you can do now, and someone says this isn't a sculpture,
I was in no way saying that at all.
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. We got into this on Friday. Someone mentioned this, and I actually hadn't heard it in a long, long time. And we all kind of looked over our shoulders like, what? Not sculpting. We're all like busting our butts to get everything done for the Comic-Con that's coming up. And someone's like, yeah, but it's digital. It's not a real sculpture. It's like, well, if once you print it out, it wouldn't exist if not for what you did in the computer. The computer doesn't do anything that you don't make it do.
Right.
So.
And that is all the time we have for today's show. I'd like to thank myself for putting all this shit together. Check out my brand new website, the-newsbox.com. It's all the comic book news that, well, I care about. I am also on all your favorite social media. I'm on the Twitter, I'm on the Facebook, and I'm even on the Google+. All you gotta do is search. And finally, we will wrap Plugorama up with this. Don't forget to check me out every Monday on the Fanboy Factor podcast at fanboyfactor.com. Don't forget, part 2 of this interview is coming up.